Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murder. This is Jeff Jones. With me today is a partial panel. We'll start from the top and we'll greet Kelly first. Hey, Kelly, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the panel and good morning to everyone in chat.
Yes, good morning to everyone in chat and good evening to everyone in chat, wherever you are in the world. And Dr. Silkman, good morning to you. How are you
Good.
doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Jeff, and welcome to everyone on the panel and everyone in chat. Great to be here. Let's get on with it, guys.
I like that. Let's get on with it. There's another phrase that we use around here, and that's on to the next, Big Jeff. We're running out of on to the next. Let's be honest.
We are. It's again feeling kind of nostalgic. It was a hot one today in New England, and it was one of those days where the second you walk outside, you're instantly drenched. Between the humidity and the heat, kind of like I was at the end of the episode last week, just because it was such a burner and a ripper. I think we need to make another one just as good this week, and let's have at it.
I wasn't up there long on the stand at all. I loved my job. But I couldn't do it anymore. When was going to be the next threat of arrest, intimidation? I didn't feel safe going out on calls at night. So I had to end it.
So, a quick question for the panel. I mean, based on what she just said and how she just put it, with the intimidation, I mean, you saw how Kratz stared her down when she was up on the stand. Do you think it's possible or even likely that, as she went out on these calls at night, like you were talking about, that she was getting, the cold shoulder or the evil eye from the officers that she had to work with on a routine basis because of her appearance at that trial? And she didn't get into it, but you just wonder what's unsaid.
Yep, you're correct, Big Jeff. I mean, look, we've all been in workplace situations whereby, people are treated differently. And clearly she was not doing the team player thing by appearing in the court. And I would dare say that there would have been a lot of repercussions when you think about the fact that Mark Wiggett forgot to call her and Sheriff Peterson threatened her with arrest. That's not exactly a good workplace practice, right? You don't feel very welcome in your job. And she honestly felt threatened and she quit. She finally gave up.
There's one thing I do want to add in it. You kind of feel like in a professional atmosphere that maybe she had like the once bitten, twice shy, right? She was kind of had a bad experience with being told you can't be involved in this case, stand down. The executive is calling you, the sheriff is meeting with you and telling you not to, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it would be hard to trust those people again. It's a very important job for the county, for the state. And if you don't have trust in the people that are supposedly literally holding the line, the police tape, the line, so you can do your job and feel safe, then yeah, I can understand where she's coming from.
This morning, the court ruling that could have led to freedom for Brendan Dassey. Instead, a federal appeals court narrowly decided to uphold his conviction, keeping him in prison.
Brendan Dassey won 2 court battles before this new ruling, which could keep him in prison for the rest of his life. That federal appeals court finding he was not intimidated or coerced into confessing to rape and murder.
It's clear he's been very resistant up to that point, very reluctant. He's telling a contradictory story that doesn't make any sense, and they're calling him on it. It comes out very slowly and painfully, but he volunteers it.
They did not even raise their voices. So I'm sorry, but you don't have to raise your voice to intimidate someone. You don't have to, and it was completely, I think it's just like so one-sided of well, you'd have to raise your voice or intimidate someone or yell at someone in case to get them to do what you'd want. You'd have to be, you know, like barking commands at them. And it's just so disingenuous because we know that that's not the case. That's not what happened to Brendan. They were slimy snakes when it came to, oh, it's going to be all right. Oh, we're going to, you know, don't worry. As long as you tell the truth, that's not, you know, and they were completely opposite of yelling, raising their voice. And yet you can still manipulate someone. So Judge Hamilton really needs to take a little look at the meanings of words and use the right ones.
I say the developers of the read technique warn against using the read technique against intellectually disadvantaged youths in particular because of the risk of false confession. And none of those items that he listed have anything to do with the reason that the read technique is dissuaded by the developers of it. So, I mean, he is wrong on the facts, you know, wrong about the psychology of the disadvantaged youth. Flat out wrong.
And it goes to show the chasm between these judges and attorneys and the reality of what it's like to be a 16-year-old intellectually disabled kid who's alone, who's shy, who's introverted, and who is incredibly suggestible. These guys have got to get off their ivory tower. They've got to stick their heads in a toilet, flush it, and come back to reality. Because there is a kid who's now a grown man who's sitting in prison for something he could not have done under any reasonable circumstances. Judge Hamilton is defending the process. He is defending the law enforcement officers to use the read technique because he knows if the read technique comes into question, there are literally thousands of cases that can be potentially overturned. He does not want to see that, nor does Brad Schimmel.
The strangeness of giving the prosecution or either side for that matter, you know, one more, draw out of that hat, or one more try at the well, however you want to put it. Just seems odd. You had your ruling. Most of the rulings are made with this, the three judge, and the en banc is very rare. It's so rare. You ask yourself, do we even need it? Is it even fair? What are the circumstances under which it's employed? And we know Jack hates it. He doesn't believe it should be employed at all because that's not the way it's done. It's just you just shouldn't get that second chance. The point that I want to make right now is that if you saw, you sort of rewind a second and look at what way those judges lined up, there were four members, four members in the majority, three in the minority. How many people are on the court? There's 8 people, right? One of them is not there. With the rarity of this en banc situation, where, this issue is so important or so contentious or so whatever, pick whatever adjective you want, that I have to have the whole court address it. Don't you think you can find a day to argue it where the whole court is there? Why do you have to, why do you have to have it when one of the judges isn't there? Does that make any sense? Is that fundamental fairness?
The investigators made my skin crawl watching this video, this lulling behavior that they conveyed, which was so dishonest, so dishonest.
I think it's worth just putting a voice to these words because this is really an important. This is the dissenting opinion, Judge Wood, who says, when the suspect is a minor, courts must review the confession and record with special care. Dassey was fed the fact that Avery went under the RAV4 hood. Dassey was fed that she was shot in the garage. EDTA does not paralyze us in the face of a clear constitutional violation. Very good point in my eyes. Without this involuntary and highly unreliable confession, the case against Dassey was almost non-existent. And I think it was just really important to read those words out loud of Judge Wood.
Now imagine it is not an average person, but a 16-year-old with a very, very low IQ who is extremely suggestible.
Judge Rovner, it's time to bring our understanding of coercion into the 21st century. Innocent people do, in fact, confess. No reasonable state court could possibly have concluded that Dassey's confession was voluntarily given. Right? I mean, she just nailed it. It's just in my mind, she's right on. And when you compare and contrast with what Judge Hamilton said, oh, they didn't raise their voices. Well, neither of these judges is saying they had to raise their voice to perform coercion. He wasn't browbeat with the phone book over the head and the old style interrogation, third degree. So very different kind of psychological technique used on him, and he was extremely suggestible to it. As the developers of the technique warned us against. So, it's this decision. I just wonder, with all the the evidences of false confessions that have built up over the years, if these judges who sat on the majority can actually sleep at night, or whether they've even bothered to analyze the nature of the false confessions that have happened. Given this technique, it's just that it's unconscionable, and they're dead wrong.
What happened to Brendan Dassey, and I've said it many, many times, is not unique, right? We've got to emphasize that point. What happened to Brendan with the use of the Reed technique has happened to many, many others, where the detectives work as a tag team and they keep you there for hours and hours and hours. They break your will. And they don't have to raise their voice. They don't have to throw a phone book. They just have to be very persuasive, coercive, and in a way, once your will is broken, you'll do anything to get out of that room. You basically tell the detectives what they want to hear. Unfortunately, it has consequences for you. Even if you have all your intellectual faculties together, your will can be broken down, and in the end, you'll admit to anything. So for someone like Brendan, who trusted in adults, his will was very easily broken and manipulated. It ended up being a complete shit show and a disaster.
It's been overturned 2 times already. You know, if you overturn it one time, and then the other 2-3 judges overturns it, you know, if it was anybody else, he would have been out, walking away. In this case, it's different. You know, you ain't walking out.
Why do you think it's so difficult?
Well, because they don't want to be wrong. And it's a high-profile case. It's going to be more harder for the state to let it go because they are wrong.
I still believe that it's going to happen because they can't stop the development of science and they can't stop the information that we have, that it will fall apart on that. That should make Brendan's case fall apart too.
Oh yeah, well, it's gonna collapse. That's when you're innocent, it's gonna break down sooner or later.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah, I ain't gonna give up.
No, you can't. I was just reading a book about post-convictions, and they said the biggest problem was that people eventually just stop. You know, they just stop filing stuff.
Yeah. Well, they know me by now. I don't stop.
Yeah. No, I think I think they might have gotten that, you know.
Sure. You know, before we let that moment pass, I think it is important. You know, we're in the last episode of the show. We're episode 10, talking about, you know, we're kind of looking to the future in this episode here a little bit, and to never give up. And I didn't know that. I have never heard that before, but apparently that's, you know, a lot of people do just give up when they just feel and that they don't have the fight left in them. And so I guess what we have seen from Zellner is that she has continued on. I mean, since this was recorded, she has continued to file motion and to present things to the court. And I think that what we heard just right there is eventually it's going to fall apart. Sooner or later, it's going to fall apart. Another one of Stephen's folksy sayings, as I like to call them.
Well, Stephen's case is based upon a lot of forensic evidence, and I think that's what Zellner is talking about when she says the science will continue, right? So she has to get these rulings from the Court of Appeals that say, well, it doesn't, you know, none of the stuff that she brings up matters, or it's procedurally barred. I think that's the real reason why people stop filing, is because they run out of, you know, avenues against which to contend the state's case, right? Once it's heard and appealed, and the court rules that, you know, you don't, you know, your point doesn't matter, you can't bring it up again because it's procedurally barred. So I don't know how much it is that they really give up, or how much it is that they actually run out of shit to file, because they don't have any more points left that haven't been addressed by a court the second time. Yeah, to me, you know, it's her statement there was based upon the forensic evidence that is in Stephen's trial. The same forensic evidence is not really used so much in Brendan's trial, because there's not a lick of forensic evidence against Brendan. So I think, the best chance that Brendan has right now is Stephen's case somehow, going positively for him. And, with Stephen being let out because, for whatever reason, because the jury finds him not guilty, or because they find some, piece of completely, unquestionable exculpatory evidence, that's really Brendan's best chance right now, in my opinion. So.
But it does raise, you're right, it does raise deeper questions and deeper points, right? Because as we know, Kratz did not want to call Brendan Dassey Stephen Avery's trial. He kept the trials differently and he kept them separate. Now, it's interesting that allegedly both Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey had committed these horrible atrocities against Teresa Hobart. The two of them were together. And yet what is interesting here, as Big Jeff alluded to, there is absolutely no forensic evidence that ties Brendan Dassey to Teresa Hobart or to any nefarious activity. And yet, allegedly, both Brendan and Stephen were together when they committed these atrocities. You don't have Culhane saying, oh, by the way, when I tested this swab, or when I tested this blood droplet or whatever, I found the genomic profile of Brendan Dassey, or I found the fingerprint, I found the hair, I found some sweat. Nothing. Zero. So we've got this bizarre situation whereby Stephen is tried on forensic evidence because the forensic evidence points to Stephen being somehow involved. And yet we have another trial based on words only. And both men are sitting in prison for life. Guys, this is truly remarkable. One would have expected to find some crossing over, some form of forensic evidence pointing to another perpetrator, Brendan Dassey, but there isn't. You see, guys, there isn't. And that's the whole argument. If Stephen's case falls apart, then surely Brendan's must as well. If Brendan's case falls apart, the state's case against Brendan falls apart, then that must strengthen Stephen's as well, right? So hence, that's why there's such a strong push to make sure that Zellner can never get in front of a judge, right? Because if you start breaking down the forensic evidence and showing that it's just complete garbage, it's going to have a flow-on effect for Brendan.
Since we learned that we lost before the en banc Seventh Circuit, we have begun taking steps to get Brendan's case before the U.S. Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court gets thousands of requests to take cases each year. And out of those thousands, they take about 80 cases.
This case has never been about the odds. It's about overcoming the odds. So to increase the chances that the court will take the case, we decided we would seek out the best lawyers we could find to help present the case to the Supreme Court.
Seth Waxman was the U.S. Solicitor General under President Clinton, in charge of that administration's cases before the Supreme Court.
He's argued 80 cases before that court. He knows what they need to hear.
A day does not go by when I don't hear Janet Reno's voice in my head saying, you're going to be criticized no matter what, so why don't we just do the right thing?
He is the person who had the juvenile death penalty declared unconstitutional.
There are not that many lawyers who appear with any regularity before the Supreme Court. Seth Waxman is one.
The Supreme Court views its most important function as ensuring uniform and harmonious application of federal law throughout the United States. if you look at cases involving juveniles or persons with limitations and how the voluntariness of their confession is being evaluated, you can see an astonishing degree of inconsistency in how or whether the special care standard is being applied.
Back in 1948, the Supreme Court said courts must analyze confessions from juveniles and from the mentally impaired with special care, with the greatest care. Since that decision, there has been silence for the most part from the court, and it's left a lot of confusion in the state courts. It's not confusion because the law is unclear. It's confusion because the courts are either ignoring or misapplying what is clear Supreme Court precedent.
So I wonder if that was something that Seth Waxman found, or whether that's something that they sort of had in their hip pocket all along, because this is the first time in the episode, in all 20 episodes, that fact has been brought up. As a matter of fact, when they asked, Laura Nyrider, what advice, are we supposed to be giving the police here? Her answer should have been, well, it's not the police that need to give it advice. It's the special care clause that was established in 1947. Why is this the first time that we're hearing about that, right? I think that, to me, I'm guessing that this was something that Seth Waxman and his law firm dug up. And I think that Drizzen and Nyrider were kind of kicking themselves in the butt for not having this sort of at the ready for their appeal. So because it's that the fact that special care does need to be taken in the event that you have intellectually disadvantaged recipients of the interrogation, that says a lot. Obviously that that consideration wasn't given to poor Brendan. But why is this the first time we're hearing about it?
I don't think it would have mattered, because the state's attorneys would have then rifled off all these reasons that they weren't transgressing, and that Brendan Dassey had resisted certain suggestions, yada, yada, yada. So they would have come up with the reasonable excuses as to say that they were showing due care, i.e. they had a comfortable room, they weren't shouting at him, they gave him drinks, his mother knew all about it. So they would have tried to overcome what that statute had basically outlined back in 47.
It's been 40 years since the United States Supreme Court even looked at the question of juvenile voluntariness. Since 1979, so much has happened. There's been an explosion of knowledge about the problem of false confessions, a realization from social science and psychologists and lawyers who have proven their clients innocent through DNA that children are more likely to falsely confess to crimes they didn't commit, and that the courts are not doing enough to protect kids when that happens.
It's really very, very important that the court take this case and model for state and federal courts how one evaluates a confession by a juvenile, and a juvenile with rather significant intellectual and social deficits.
They really are laying out a really valid case in my eyes as to why the Supreme Court should take a case like this. Been 50 years since anything like this has been ruled on. Look at all the new scientific literature that has been published on this topic. Look at what we know now. I'm actually pretty gosh darn compelled at this point.
I think the entire country has an interest in having the Supreme Court hear this case. I mean, every one of us wants a system of criminal justice that ferrets out the perpetrators of crime and punishes them appropriately, but that also respects the individual liberties on which our country was founded.
We need only 4 of the 9 justices to agree to take the case.
After a bunch of back and forth, all of a sudden on April 17th of 2018, Mr. Fallon has mailed to my office in an original evidence package with evidence tape on it, the CD. So he disclosed it to me as if it were an original disclosure. Brady requires a timely disclosure. So if you look at the fact that the Veely report, the forensic analysis of the computer, was completed on May 10th of 2006, the Fassbender report was not turned over, even mentioning the CD, until December of 2006. And the Fassbender report says the disc received from Detective Veely, as well as the hard copy pages of instant message conversations, were maintained in Fassbender's possession. So 2,400 pages of evidence is kept by Fassbender, not given to the defense. It was never, ever given to the trial team, the appellate team. It was not disclosed until it was given to me. The Veely CD was withheld because it would have destroyed the credibility of the state's star witness.
Bobby Dassey, it is an eyewitness without any bias, is a individual that deserves to be given a lot of credit, because sometime between 2:30 and 2:45, he sees Teresa Halbach taking photographs. Mr. Dassey's looking out this window, a clear view, sees the pictures being taken of the SUV, a clear pathway, and that as she walks towards Mr. Avery's, that's the last Miss Halbach is seen. That's the last she's seen alive.
Did Mr. Kratz overstretch what Bobby Dassey said? In other words, did he draw conclusions that Bobby never stated, right? Because if you notice the importance of Bobby Dassey to the state, and hence why Kathleen Zona makes such a big deal about the withholding of the Veely CD. Now, I know with the benefit of hindsight, we know about the pornographic searches, etc., etc. But we're talking back during Stephen Avery's trial, the impact that would have had. And I blame not Bobby Dassey here. I blame Kratz.
Well, I mean, I believe that the omission of the Veely CD, it is a violation. Just because it's digital in nature doesn't make it any less, any less of a piece of forensic evidence, right? It took a digital forensics expert to extract that data from the the content of the computer, and there was obviously a deliberate attempt, right? There was verbal and communicative manipulation to the defense, saying, "Oh, we didn't find anything of evidentiary value on the CD, on the Dassey computer." Well, it's debatable. It's highly debatable whether or not there was something of evidentiary value, and I think there was. It certainly bore, even at the time, bore further investigation, right? And it's just incomprehensible to me that you can take the work product, of a forensics expert and just bury it and not deliver it to the prosecution, irrespective of what it says. They didn't know at the time. They didn't have the value of the investigation that we've subsequently done. To me, it doesn't matter if you hide this evidence. If you bury something, bury the work product of any forensics, right? What's the point? Just because you don't, the Court of Appeals eventually ruled that, oh yeah, because they had the original full content, they being the defense had the full content of the computer, even though they didn't have the software to read it. That's their problem. And that is a joke of a rule. It breaks my heart that Kathleen, I mean, she made a comment about why she doesn't go to federal appeals, why she didn't do a federal appeal on this. I think, maybe after this Sawinski stuff, after it runs its course and she's like out of stuff, I'm thinking she's going to be kicking herself in the butt for not pursuing this down a federal route, because it's incomprehensible to me that you can bury a piece of forensic evidence that was a work product of a state hired forensic expert. Just because it's digital forensics doesn't make it any different. And it would have caused the defense to act differently. And had the defense known what was on it and could have brought it up, maybe further investigation could have been done. But it certainly would have cast a different light on him. Even if that light, it would have cast a different light. Let's put it that way. I'll just leave it at that. So it really bugs me about the burying of the VLCD. I believe it's a Brady violation, and even though the Court of Appeals ruled that this opinion should not be used to evaluate other cases, don't ever think that the people who want to put their will on you, right? The people who want to do the same thing to you aren't going to do the same thing again, because they got away with it this time. Once they get away with it once, there's a thought that they could get away with it again, right? So just watch out. So that's the type of if that's the type of justice system you want, then have at it. That's what type of justice system I want. So anyway,
I just want to weigh in a little bit more to the point with what Dr. Silkman said, and that was, can Kratz stretch the Bobby narrative here? Well, his testimony in a sense. Bobby never places Teresa and Stephen together. Ken Kratz does that. He leaves the jury, he leads them to that conclusion because of how he delivers that little spill that he just did. Secondly, I agree with you, Big Jeff, like in hindsight, the covering of the Valley City was always dodgy. Even though I have my problems with the whole aspect of it, I agree with you. I agree that the way they handled it was a little bit cheeky. Well, wasn't a little bit. It was cheeky, and it was, wrong legally in my opinion how they did it. But I think there's a lot of legal layers to it as well that I have to respect. And because I'm not a lawyer, and because the research I've done and the lawyers and the people that I have spoken to who have gave me some really great information and helped me understand a few things, I don't want to obviously paraphrase something that they've said to me and get it wrong and then mislead a legal stance on something. But I will say that, the whole motive, I think, goes back, because I did the timeline of it, is when you go back and you see why the Valley CD was kind of withheld back all the way back the beginning in 2006, was purely just to discredit and to tie the hands of a Denny argument, a third-party liability, be able to be used. They had a hearing specifically for that, and Judge Willis decided that that the gentleman that they put forward on their Denny list didn't have all the three prongs. yes, Bobby Dassey was one of them. And I think in hindsight, we look back now and say, well, with this information with the computer, would that have given him that third prong, which is the motive, which is where we are at now? And that is Kathleen's trying to identify that to the courts, that this content back then could have been the third prong. The reason why I said layers is because I go back to history as well. And I go back to what decisions were being made by Judge Willis in favor of the defense and in favor of the prosecution at the time. Now, we can't just assume that the Dassey computer would have changed the outcome, or that they could have even perjured Bobby on the stand, because it might not have ever got through to discovery. It might have stopped at the door. They might have reviewed the content and decided, hey, listen, there is nothing on the 31st that indicates the murder specifically to Teresa Halbach. There is nothing in there before the murder that indicates that there was someone was planning on dismembering or whatever. Like, there's no direct connection on that computer before the murder. And I can say that confidently from what documents we do have, because I've gone through them one by one, as many people have. And I have to say respectfully that there is a few of us that have gone through it. And I might see something that someone else doesn't. Doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't even mean I'm wrong. It just means our perspective of it plays a part. But that goes back to the layer of the law. It doesn't mean the judge would have been favorable and went, yes, I'm going to let this in for you to be able to create this, liability here, that might not have ever made it regardless. And therefore, there would have been no Denny again. And that is the prongs that need to be met, because that's the burden that we are now. And I think that is the one point that I think that a lot of people, they don't forget. I think we're all mindful of it, but it just, the legal side of it, when we're not lawyers and we get reminded a lot by the skilled and qualified people that have put this forward, and that is, this is post-conviction. The burden now is on the defense side to be able to produce the evidence and be able to provide facts and stuff to move their defense forward. There is no room, in a sense, for reasonable doubt. You say that shit for a jury. That's been done. It's now trying to undo that damage that was done. And that's where we're at now.
Correct. And hence the bar is set higher. And it's almost impossible to jump.
Well, the smell test for a legal system ought to be a little bit simpler than that. It ought to be, would it be okay if it happened to you? And I can tell you right now, if there's a piece that if there's a piece of evidence, if I'm sitting in prison, that I think might have had a chance of helping me, right? And yeah, you're right. It might not have raised Bobby to the level of Denny. The question is that the question that's being asked right now is whether it, whether it would have swayed, his credibility to a jury had that been brought up. The Court of Appeals ruled no on that, obviously, but it's not okay that this piece of evidence was buried. And you went through a lot of mights and woulda, couldas, and I don't disagree that there's a way that those might and wouldas dominoes could have fell. But the fact of the matter is the defense was not given the opportunity to try and push on those dominoes, right? To see what way they would have fallen. And that's the nature that is the not the Denny rule, but the Brady rule is in question.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. But the issue is, and going back to the timeline that I created, because I really explored that and I wanted to focus on the shenanigans that Fassbender kept it and withheld it for as long as he did. But I hate to say it, but in hindsight, and this is my opinion, but the defense dropped the ball as well. They knew about the computer and they knew about the idea that this could have been a great aspect to their defense team as early as, February of 06. They're the ones that raised it, yet they didn't follow it up when they finally got it into their possession. Whether they had the software or not, the courts made a statement saying that all they would have had to have done was ask for a like a delay just to have an opportunity to get the software and explore it. But they took it on face value that Ken Kratz said there is no evidentiary value in it, because and that's when he was cheeky and said it's Brendan Dassey's computer. But they had the opportunity to do it, but they just chose not to at the end, because they were tipped off by Stephen as early as February of 06, before even Ken Kratz kind of latched onto it. It was actually Buting that sent Ken Kratz a message in, let me just double check, I think it was March, asking, no, my apology, the 5th of April, asking him where the computer was because they wanted it. So it was always a part of the defense strategy, and obviously their legal, where they were going to go legally with it. And when they finally got it, they didn't do anything with it. And all they would have had to do was ask for an extension of time so they could get someone in to review it, but they chose not to. Now, I guess that's the point that I think a lot of people said, I think it was more the report side of it. The report side didn't go over, which was what the valet kind of had summarized, which was in the actual the CD, what they obtained. And I think that's what a lot of people get more pissy about, is that they didn't get that, so they could just review his summary and go, hang on a minute, now I can make a decision whether or not it's...
Why do you think they shouldn't be entitled to that, right? They should be entitled to that work product, right? I mean, it isn't, at the end of the day, even one of Dr. Silkman's DNA machines, right? Doesn't it? You put a piece of matter in there and it spits out an answer of DNA, right? Some DNA profile. How is a computer search any different? Just because what goes in is digital? Why shouldn't why is that just excluding that piece of that work product from the defense? They didn't even know it existed. To me, it's a clear Brady. I mean, in hindsight, the content is questionable. I don't disagree, but does that exclude it from being a Brady violation at the time when the defense could have taken a different route?
Probably not. And like I said to you, I've never disagreed with this stance on it at all. If anything, I think there was an even bigger Brady in the entire thing that got denied, and that was the bones, the returning of the bones. That there was a paper trail, there was a clear fuckery going on with that, and that was even denied. And I'd hate to say it, I'm not trying to compare it, it's a bit of an apple and oranges in terms of comparison, but one does seem a lot stronger than the other. And I always look at it like that, if the bones didn't even reach the bar, and I think that was clear cut Brady material, then this one's a little bit iffy when it's just talking about a possible report. They should have got it. I'm not disputing that. They should have got everything. Everything should have been laid out to them. But I don't know whether or not it would have even been able to do what we need to be doing now. And that's what the whole argument is now with this new motion.
Well, Big Jeff, it looks like it's got to go right back over to you, because it's about that time that we wrap this one up. This is a little bit of a monumentous wrap up. It's not the big one, the big cheese one that you're going to have next week, but it's the last wrap up you do before you do your last wrap up. So it's like your last regular wrap up.
Wow.
Does that make any sense? Is that putting pressure on you? Because I hope
that's
it is.
That's a lot of pressure. Well, I mean, this is why one of the reasons why Ma'am was such an enthralling series to watch, because of the roller coaster ride that they put you on. We started off, finishing off the coroner stuff with Deb Kadich at the beginning of the episode, and how she eventually had to quit because she felt intimidated, and it leaves you kind of feeling angry that her testimony wasn't heard. It was, as we talked about in the last episode, with Kel's great question. Just another possible straw that could have, tilted that scale that was so close either way. But then we move into Brendan, and oh my God, whenever it comes to Brendan, that we just most of the people, even many of the guilters, for example, on Reddit, they'll even come right out and say, I'm not even sure what they said about Brendan it was even true. We don't not even sure a word out of his mouth was true. Just about everybody. There's a huge number of people that just realized the injustice that was done to Brendan Dassey, and just to watch this injustice play out. From the nonsensical comments of Judge Hamilton and hearing the on-point comments of Judges Wood and Vosner, it makes your heart break for the not for the kid, for the whole justice system, when two justices can see it so clearly, but they have the majority goes the other way in a politically motivated decision, obviously politically motivated. And it just makes your heart sink to come back to this, yet another, what I think a strong Brady violation of the state, sort of, gets the anger pounding again. So it's from anger to heartbreak and back to anger. It's just why the series is so compelling to watch. And in my mind, I remain convinced of Stephen and Brendan's innocence. And none of this bullshit that Kratz is trying to throw at us. The state didn't have to hide the VLEC. If their case was so good, they wouldn't have hit it. And they knew there was trouble with it. So they, in typical dirty, disgusting fashion, Ken Kratz found a way through the gentleman's agreement to sort of keep it under the state's keep it under the defense's radar. Here's a homework question for you, Kel. Was ineffective assistance of counsel procedurally barred? Because it keeps on coming back to the defense, and I don't know the answer. I had thought I heard that it was procedurally barred, but I don't know if you get to take that on a case by case basis. So maybe I'm not sure that you can answer that right away, but I know you've probably done the most readings, the most reading of the Court of Appeals rulings out of anybody. So. Anyway,
yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my summary. On to the good doctor.
This was a very interesting episode. We should entitle this podcast "The What If," because it really was just all about an intellectual discussion about potential scenarios. What if this happened? What if that happened? And it was very, very frustrating, because I could imagine a whole room of legal attorneys or lawyers doing precisely the same thing. Oh, what if this happened? And what if that happened? To me, and I'll be very, very quick here, it goes to show the brilliant strategies that were done by Fassbender and Uyghur initially in questioning Brendan Dassey, but also the incredible strategies that were done by Kratz, Fallon, and Garn. So it goes to show that making sure that you are prepared to the max before a trial begins, and also discussing all these motions and having these gentlemen agreements in a pre-trial, goes to show how they have a major influence on the outcome of a trial. And we can see this now. And it's incredible that Kelly, Big Jeff, we're asking all these big questions, and it's very frustrating because they are what if questions. And it goes back to what I've always said. The proper preparation of a trial and what happens during a trial is so critical, because once the jury make their decision, it's almost impossible to overturn. Thank you, everyone.
And Kel, if you wouldn't give us your wrap-up comments for today and lead us out of episode 46.
Sure. I didn't comment much in terms of the Brendan side of it, because I honestly, like I wrote to you guys in the private side of it, I was in mourning. It's almost like when you see that final part, you go back into that mourn stage. And for me, it was like we're witnessing again the loss of another life. He might not be unalive, but his life and the ability to have new experiences and live on the outside as a free man was completely and utterly destroyed in that moment on that last decision. So I just want to say kudos to all you gentlemen that, you know, spoke on behalf of Brendan, and everyone that's always in the chat that, you know, understands the, you know, part of the Brendan finale of, hey, his entire, you know, defense or the case part for him kind of took a full stop, and it's kind of hasn't moved forward since. And we know that Laura and Drizzen are always trying, and they always say, you know, that they're always working in the background, and I believe it. I think that they go out and, you know, they go out now to seminars and places around the world, and they show the read technique, and they actually show Brenna's interrogation video, my apology, and show people what not to do. So although it's not maybe changing the outcome for Brendan in the present time, it's educating and it's potentially saving another Brendan Dassey in the future. In terms of the Brady concept that we kind of just went through, everything that the guy said, especially Big Jeff, you know, I don't disagree. I think there was a Brady, and I think that her original motion was powerful. I was really shocked. I really honestly thought that last motion, her main one, was going to get us an evidentiary hearing. To me, it was powerful. It was articulate. It was to the point. It had a lot of facts. It had a lot of backing, a lot of supporting documents and stuff to back it, and even forensic testing to back it with her experts. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. I get the whole, you know, concept that we keep saying, the what if case, but we are in post-conviction, and it's the irony of it is, in a sense, and this is me speaking in my own legal terms and how I'm viewing it. It's probably not, you know, this isn't a lawyer saying anything here, but we are in the what if, and Kathleen is presenting the what ifs. She's presenting new evidence, and she's saying, what if this was known back then? Could it have changed the outcome? And that is what the motions are about. So the what ifs are important, because that is what's making the case right now. If we didn't have the what ifs, there'd be nothing to talk about for her either, because there'd be nothing new to present and ask the courts to review it. Could it have changed the outcome? So I just want to thank everyone, of course, for being here. My panel members, Jeff Jones for always hosting amazingly, and obviously everyone in chat. Until next time, guys, I'll speak to you later.
Well, Kel, I think that's a record for you. There's really nothing I can add to what you said, Kel, or to what the others said on the panel. So I'm not going to try, but I do want to give a shout out to all the people out there in chat who've been cruising with us all the way along. And if you're just finding the episode now, I really appreciate that as well. So keep that like and subscribe button moving. Share the content when you can. Really appreciate how far we've come in just over a year and a half, and it's all thanks to everybody out there in chat. So for Big Jeff and Dr. Silkman, for Cal and for Jack out in the ether, this is Jeff Jones saying, this has been Discussing a Murderer.